Hey up, folks. It looks as if the Reform Party could very well join the long and sorry list of insurgent parties that have shot into the air like a rocket, exploded in light, and then crashed to earth, never to be spoken of again. The fault that these parties have can be pretty briefly summarised. I remember the Social Democratic Party in the 1980s that promised to break the mould of British politics. Well, they broke the mould all right. The problem is they did it over each other's heads. The problem that insurgent parties have is that they love disunion. They love infighting. And it's the one thing that is guaranteed to turn off the average punter. Because you see, Joe Punter, Tilly Flop, the people out there, the real people who are not particularly interested in politics, they're not going to debate about who's right and who's wrong over a policy issue. What they want is a united party that by and large gives the impression that it speaks for people like them. If a party can do that, then it can be successful. And the best example of that is here in Scotland, the Scottish National Party. A party that, as a small party, ruthlessly suppressed the divisions that existed in its ranks and made sure that everything was dealt with behind closed doors before presenting a united front to Mr. and Mrs. MacPunter. The SNP has been in power now in Scotland for very many years, and in spite of the scandals surrounding, well, I won't bother naming them, in spite of the scandals surrounding its leadership, it looks set to win the next Scottish general election, which is due to be held next year. Unity is what matters. Now, in the case of reform, you would think that people like Rupert Lowe, who is leading the dissenting faction within reform, they would accept that the only reason that they managed to get their well-upholstered arses onto the green leather benches in the House of Commons is that the party was led by Nigel Farage. People didn't vote for Rupert Lowe, they voted for Farage's man. Now, one fellow who understands that is Richard Tice. Tice was leading reform until Farage made his comeback, whereupon Tice, ever the team player, stepped down and handed the reins back to Nigel Farage. Because as a team player, he knew that it's the team that wins. And if Farage wins, then Tice wins, which is why Richard Tice is now Richard Tice MP. He wouldn't have been had he remained leader of the Reform Party. So why don't people like these dissidents, Rupert Lowe in particular, just sit back with a nice biscuit and a nice hot cup of shut the fuck up and leave things to Nigel, accept that they owe everything to him, and if he asks them to go and take his dogs for a walk, they say, yes, boss, I'll do that. They don't do it because, unfortunately, these insurgent parties tend to be made up of big swinging egos, many of whom are frankly also a bit weird. These are people who regard politics as an important pastime. And they go to meetings and they argue about the the minutiae of policy. Most people don't, and they don't realise that. And they think that they are far more important than they are. So here's a tip to reform, which of course they will ignore. First, don't argue in public. That's just essential. If you are an insurgent within an insurgent party, follow your leader. Follow your leader until he's no longer your leader. And when you're going to remove him, make sure that you have a big enough faction on side to do it. Far better not to do it at all. Leave Nigel in power. Look, Reform's not going to win the next election, come what may. But with Nigel Farage, they might win a few more seats. If Farage is forced out, then they're unlikely to win any seats. So, follow Nigel. That's the first thing. Second thing is hope and pray for some division within the two major parties. The aim of reform has to be to supplant one or the other, and that's not going to happen unless one or the other collapses. If Labour splits, then Reform is in a perfect position to move in, as Labour did after the Liberal split during the First World War, and supplant the Labour Party, as Labour supplanted the Liberals. Unfortunately for Reform, Labour is moving dramatically to the right. Hence all this desire of the Labour leadership to do over claimants. I don't think they got elected with a desire to do over claimants, but they do have a desire to remain in office, and they know that there are a lot of nasty people living in nasty little towns where petty grievances reign supreme, who think that all the claimants are on the fiddle. That vote is up for grabs because the Tories are not as right-wing on doing over claimants as Labour currently is. I think what Labour's doing is trying to head off the Reform Party. Now, they may get away with it if they can stay together, but I would not be surprised to see Labour split over this and other issues. Reform really needs to be sitting in the wings, doing absolutely nothing, with its members drinking those cups of shut the fuck up that I previously mentioned, and await events. Reform could take over from Labour if Labour splits, but it won't take over from Labour unless Labour splits. If Labour doesn't split, Reform will remain, so long as it's united, a serious party of protest. It could, in northern England, become what the Liberal Democrats are in southern England, the sort of official party of protest. When you're a bit pissed off with Labour, you vote Reform. Just as in the south, when you're a bit pissed off with the Tories, you vote Liberal. That's not a bad way to be. And some of Reform's policies could be adopted by one of the other two main parties, so long as Reform exists, and it will only continue to exist if it's united. Think on, folks.